we've had conversion therapy. There's something, I suppose we heard about it more in America, about sort of evangelical Christian groups, and basically, particularly with children, with teenagers and younger people, basically being sent to these sort of conversion therapy camps even, which are basically try and convert them from being gay, that you can somehow turn people away from being gay. There's a move to ban that sort of therapy, so-called, but that's all got very confused into the trans issue. To explain how it's all got involved.
Yes, now you're right that it is complex and confusing. So obviously that is seen as gay conversion therapy. There are also the kind of hideous physical treatments, if you like, that people have think of as from the 60s and 70s, really horrendous stuff, electric shock treatment and things like that are all absolutely horrific. And I think this is where this idea of banning conversion therapy came from. But the Government Equalities Office did a couple of years of research into this issue and found out that none of these practices were actually going on in the UK today, and all of the therapies, we should say, that you've mentioned and I've just spoken about are already illegal under existing UK law. So obviously grievous bodily harm, sexual abuse, coercion in the Domestic Abuse Act, and so all those horrific things that we think of as gay conversion therapy are already banned. So the idea of bringing in a law to ban things that are already banned is probably not wise.
Crazy. So but then it developed, it became an issue as part of the trans ideology, didn't it?
Exactly. Over the last couple of years, the kind of Stonewall lobby, if you like, have campaigned for this ban to include a ban on trans conversion therapy. Now, firstly, it's not clear what trans conversion therapy is, although I think people understand it, that you shouldn't be telling a child who thinks they're trans that they're not trans, or tries to stop a child, let's say a girl who wants to be a boy, tries to stop that girl from dressing differently, taking puberty blockers, taking cross-sex hormones. Is that trans conversion therapy? We're not sure. But this is the kind of idea that we think campaigners want to include in the bill. And if we look what's happened in somewhere like Canada, for example, who did bring in a conversion therapy ban last year, a full piece of legislation, it's now illegal for parents not to accept the self-proclaimed gender identity of their child, and clinicians not to accept that. And you'll find that in Canada now, 70% of the children referred to their gender clinics are prescribed puberty blockers, and a quarter of girls are referred for their breasts to be removed.
Oh my God!
Because
clinicians
are only allowed to affirm what the child says.
And we're talking about a child, so a 4-year-old or a 14-year-old, and again, we've seen this massive explosion in girls doing this. It used to be more boys. In recent years, it's girls, and we think this is like a, just sort of social contagion, YouTube videos of, hey, you crazy mixed up kid, but look, this is the solution. You're really trans, and this is the solution. Go on these puberty blockers, and it's basically cut your breasts off. I mean, let's talk about it, what it is. That's going to be a solution. Everything's going to be fine. So a child of whatever age can go to their parents or go to their teacher or their doctor and say, this is what I think. Even if they've got, as we know, a lot of the children who've gone through this, they've got other issues. Many have suffered from some sort of abuse. They've got autism, other issues with learning development or learning disabilities or the like, or other mental health issues, anorexia, others. They can go along, and then it would be a crime, effectively, for their doctor, their teacher, even their mum and dad to say, I don't think you were born in the wrong body. I think this might be the issue. Let's talk about it. That would be criminalised?
We don't know. That's the honest answer, because there isn't a draft bill published, and the government and indeed campaigners aren't able to say exactly what the conversion practice is and what should be made illegal. But the problem is, if you look at Canada and Victoria and Australia and other places that have gone down this route, once you accept the principle that you should be telling parents, clinicians, that it's unlawful for them to challenge a child's perceived gender identity, that bill gets a life of its own. And of course, the government can't control amendments that are put down to the bill and things like that once it gets into the House of Commons. And so if you accept that a conversion practice is doing something that prevents a child from changing gender, if you like, then of course, whatever the bill says, it's going to have a serious chilling effect on parents and clinicians and free speech. And just going back to what you're saying about the kind of girls that are in this position, they're extremely vulnerable. 70% of the girls that are referred to the Tavistock Clinic have at least 5 other what we call comorbidities. They've been abused, they're suicidal, they're depressed, they've got autism, they've lost a parent. You know, these are incredibly vulnerable children. And the idea that the only thing a clinician would be able to say to that child is, yes, I agree you should become a boy, is dangerous. You know, and we shouldn't be going down that route.
The thing for me, it is the equivalent. Look, we used to refer to this, people who were trans, again, you can be compassionate and respectful of people want to live their lives how they want to live their lives. When it's children, well, then we want some safeguarding for under 18s. I think that's where a lot of parents draw the line there. But however, we used to treat this as what is gender dysphoria, a mental health issue where people believe they are born in the wrong body. No one is born in the wrong body. Your body is, by definition, your body. Now, people may believe they are the opposite gender, or they may believe they're the opposite sex. They are not the opposite gender, opposite sex. They aren't. Sex is a fact. It's not a feeling. It's not a thought. It's a fact. And this is the thing. When you get into a situation where you're telling people, oh, you're affirming that to a 4-year-old, or 14-year-old, or even a 24-year-old, you would never think of doing that for any other disorder. You would never say to someone who was, you know, 5, 6, 7 stone, who was starving themselves to death through bulimia or anorexia, and they said, I'm too fat. You would never go, oh, yes, you are. You should carry on starving yourself to death because that's your every right to do that and what you think is true. There is no other mental health disorder where you would affirm that and encourage it as opposed to try and help that person.
That's absolutely right. And I think at the heart of this issue is, do you believe that parents should be able to say no to their children, even if that causes a child short-term emotional distress, if it's in the long-term interest of the child? And, you know, I personally think you absolutely, it's not only a parent's right, it's a parent's duty to say no to a child when that is protecting them. But I think the kind of philosophy behind a lot of the people who campaign for this is that if a child wants something, if a child's emotions are pointing in a certain direction, you should just accept it. And like you say, if you think about any other issue, you know, a 5-year-old who wanted to drink beer or a 6-year-old who wanted to smoke, you know, they might be emotionally distressed if you say no, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. And I think that is at the heart of this issue, is what is parental authority, and do parents have the right or indeed the duty to protect their children from these ideologies that, you know, will cause them harm if we don't put a check on them.
And not be called a bigot or a transphobe into the bargain when they're just trying to protect their child.
Absolutely. I think there's something about the language in this that we need to be really careful of, because it's a bit like the Equality Act. Who could oppose an Equality Act? Who could oppose something that puts equality into law? And on the face of it, you know, who would object to that? But when we see what that act has done through the public sector equality duty, for example, I mean, Mayor Forstater got sacked for saying that she didn't believe, you know, that she thought there was a difference between the biological sexes and had to take it to court.
That's it. When we
to
talk
prove that, you know,
and when we talk about a law that may actually go further than people fear, well, that's what's happened with gender recognition, etc. Miriam Cates, you've been fantastic on this. I know you contacted lots of MPs. Says you've got to speak up now, otherwise this is going to end up in the King's Speech, going to end up as law. Looks like Downing Street have been listening. Thank goodness for that. You've been a great champion on this issue. Miriam Cates, thank you for joining us.